Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just another tinfoil hat. Welcome to my show. Today, we are going to be discussing a truly bizarre little number, the case of the Winsted, Connecticut creatures. On September 15th of 1967, two 14-year-old girls, Carol Luke and Ruth Pacini, were hanging out listening to music in Carol's second-story bedroom of her farmhouse on Wallens Hill Road just outside of Winsted, Connecticut. Carol's mother had gone to the store at around 7:30, and so they were actually awaiting her return when the events unfolded at about 8:45. Both girls were looking out the window when they saw this brilliant egg-shaped object. They said it was about the size of a small car, about 200 yards away near this barn complex. As they watched it, they thought at first that it was near the ground, and then came to realize that it was actually hovering in the air. And so as they were just looking at this bizarre thing, they noticed that it ran through a spectrum of colors, and it proceeded to do so actually like 10 times. It began as this super brilliant kind of white light, and then turned beige, then pink, then a deep scarlet, all the while remaining absolutely soundless. However, the silence was not to last long. Suddenly, the girls heard a noise which they compared to that of a power motor, firing up but not really starting, coming from the area of the barn. And immediately after hearing this noise, the girls claimed that they saw two small figures, both about 4 feet tall with really kind of abnormally large heads, come out of the barn. So they said that they couldn't really get a super good look at them, but it looked like both of them were wearing these kind of tight-fitting skin-tight suits. And Carol claimed that she believed, but wasn't exactly sure, that one of them seemed to be clearer than the other one, and also had an even larger head. So the creatures actually ran from the barn to this mailbox, which was located right on the road, and stayed there for a few minutes, before running across the road and stopping underneath a large tree. Suddenly, headlights appeared on the road, and at this point the duo ran back across the street near the barn, where they were joined by a third entity which looked exactly like them. The trio then, as the car approached, ran and hid behind the barn and out of view. Now, the girls tried in vain to catch another glimpse of the three little humanoids after they had vanished behind the barn, but apparently they were gone for good. However, they were able to still see the light, which was growing increasingly dim. They said that as the car drove by, that's when it kind of seemed to almost douse its light. And by the time Mrs. Luke returned home, it was faint to the point of obscurity. Now, the two teenagers weren't the only people to witness the strange event. The woman across the street, Mrs. Pinoza, actually had seen the strange egg-shaped object when she was outside getting her laundry, and was so frightened that she ran into the house, locked the doors, shuttered the windows, and pretty much just hoped that it would go away. Two other adults, one M. Moorhead and B. Marecki, both observed the same bright object within an hour of the initial sighting. Now, like so many of my favorite landing cases, the defining feature of this incident, in my opinion, has got to be the nonsensical behavior of the entities involved, which, another point, it is super tempting to call these little guys UFO occupants. However, at no point did it seem as though they actually occupied the UFO. I mean, merely the egg-shaped objects just showed up, ran through its spectrums, apparently did a few diagonal maneuvers, and then it dimmed, all the while the entities in question were just simply running around. Now, to me, this is almost kind of like indicative of like the monster in the closet concept. You know, sure, these entities did show up in conjunction with this anomalous aerial object. However, what they were actually occupying was the barn, you know, the super mundane man-made structure. So, you know, when you think about it that way, it's really kind of odd. Now, of course, too, the fact that these entities were pretty much ushered in by this strange mechanical noise has ties to many different types of paranormal phenomena. Witnesses to the Mothman said that their homes were assailed by these strange mechanical noises night after night. People who experience poltergeist phenomena and even some hauntings cite these bizarre mechanical noises that, you know, just show up constantly. And then, too, there's even some weird accounts of Bigfoot, where people claim that there are these anomalous sounds of heavy machinery when there's actually nothing like that in the area. But anyway, back to the nonsense. It really is intriguing to me that these little humanoids were literally spending their entire time, that they were around, just kind of running back and forth across the road. Of course, the obvious connection, only highlighted by the rural setting and agricultural ties, is to the lighthearted play of the good folk. And to me, this is kind of a classic example of that, of course, just with a flying saucer in tow. You know, also, too, there's kind of this very modern play at a very old concept. There are so many stories of the fairies showing up when people are playing music. So here, instead of some, peasant with a fiddle, we have these two teenage girls listening to a radio. However, the core concept there remains the same. Another really interesting point is that inconclusive comment made by Carol, that it seemed as though one of the entities was clearer than the other one. Again, for the record, she said that she couldn't really be sure of it, and it does indeed sound like, the lighting conditions were definitely not ideal. So needless to say, I wish we had a clearer understanding of what she meant by that. Because of course, countless entities, whether we're talking ghosts, fairies, hey, creatures of all ages, seem to sometimes have their image lost in translation. At its core too, this is just simply another case of these strange entities accompanied by a light anomaly. And in this case too, there's also this really weird concept that kind of reminds me of the Cisco Grove encounter, where it seems as though the entities and the object that they show up with both bear a behavioral connection. And that especially has to do with responding to man-made, mundane lights. In Cisco Grove, both the posse of entities and the so-called mothership fled from fire, while in this case the object dimmed and the entities hid as the car's headlights approached the area. So this weird kind of response that anomalies have to lights, there's even this fantastic selection of personal experiences which John Keel had as he was researching the events of Point Pleasant in the Mothman Prophecies, in which strange lights, objects, or entities, they seem to really engage with whatever lights we have, whether it's flashlights, headlights, or fire. Safe to assume it really seems as one of the greatest ways that we can affect a change or get a response from the phenomenon is through the use of light, which is really ironic considering that many investigators and researchers also believe that the phenomenon itself affects a change on the witness through the use and manipulation of light. So it's kind of weird how there's that give and take there. Now, from a more symbolic angle, there's something I've kind of been thinking about for a while as it pertains to many of these really classic, contact encounters or landing encounters with UFOs. And that's the fact that so often a very common shape for the object or the craft involved is it's described as being in the shape of an egg. So, especially like in this case and also in the Trasco encounter, it's a little interesting too because in neither case did it really appear to be a craft. Of course, in this one, the entities never even appeared to enter or exit the object, while in the Trasco encounter, the space leprechaun entered the object through no visible entry point. But yet again, it's just that really common motif of the egg. And mythologically speaking, oftentimes, the egg is associated with this primordial chaos, out of which this plane of existence or some semblance of order kind of arises. Of course, too, there's also tied into that the concepts of life and resurrection. But also there's this element of that which is hidden. And so it's really intriguing to me that something symbolizing all of these concepts is seen. It's such a common motif throughout the UFO phenomenon. So, and again, too, back to this case, this wasn't simply two kids claiming to see something. We have these corroborating reports from 3 separate adults. And it's just amazing because unless the whole neighborhood was up for a good old-fashioned hoax, that means that something really did occur here. It's also, too, really interesting to see the different responses from people. Of course, Mrs. Pinoza was so frightened that she ran inside before the humanoid entities even showed up, whereas the 2 teenagers were kind of just more curious. They were straining at the window, trying to get another look at the object or the entities, even after the entities had vamoosed and the object had all but faded from view. Well, if you enjoyed this episode on the creepy Connecticut creatures, please like, and if you're new to this field of crop circles, go ahead and subscribe to see what weirdness the future may have in store. Till then, you can keep up with whatever else I might possibly have going on my website, justanothertinfoilhat.com, and for exclusive content, make sure to check out my Patreon page, which is also listed under Just Another Tinfoil Hat. For today, I am Zelia Edgar, signing off.
Doing.